I'll introduce all four of the panelists in a row, and then you can save your applause for the end. First, we have Scott Burnett. He's the head of corporate risk and broking in Asia for Willis Towers Watson. You guys can come up on stage as one. Craig Ellis, who's an MSIG CEO in Singapore. We have Didier Bélot, who heads ASEAN region for Swiss Re Corporate Solutions, and Peter Tay, who's the chief digital officer for NTUC Income. Now, please give all the esteemed panelists a big round of applause. So a big thank you, first of all, to all of you for spending your very precious time. In general, for all of our demo days, we like to do something to keep a pulse on all the executives in the insurance industry, hear from their perspective about what they think about the Insurtech trends that are currently happening. So myself, selfishly, very personally excited to hear your guys' opinions and thoughts on the space. I'm sure the audience is as well. But instead of your name and background, just a brief introduction of what you guys have done, your journey so far, your current role, and just to introduce yourselves to the audience. Peter?
Okay, so my name is Peter. So I head the digital transformation in NTUC Income. We are a composite insurer in Singapore. So basically, over the last 2 to 3 years, Income has been focusing on reinventing the traditional insurance and how do we partner with digital partners as well as the ecosystem to push out new products, including micro insurance, which is not really seen in this part of the world. So this is what we've been doing, and of course to also expose the larger organization, how do we transform the culture as well as bring digital and tech to our everyday work. Yep.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Didier Bélot, and first of all, thank you, Kayvon, and the whole Plug and Play organization for having me and the Swiss Re organization represented here today. My role is I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Swiss Re in Singapore and also responsible for the broader Southeast Asian region, including Korea and India. I've been with the group for about 12 years now. At that time, Corporate Solutions, which is our commercial insurance unit, didn't exist. And my background is really strategy, structured finance, structured insurance. So I saw innovation from, I would say, a customer's lens, developing solutions that spans across banking, finance, capital markets, and insurance. And more recently, in my general management role, I see innovation and the digital transformation happening all across the value chain, from our customers to our process, but also, most importantly, to our mindset. Glad to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Burnett from Willis Towers Watson. I'm responsible for our portfolio of businesses across Asia and predominantly responsible day-to-day for the broking business across Asia, which is about 50% of the business that Willis Towers Watson does. I'd say central to any topic of innovation and technology for us, it's always central to the client experience. So running a portfolio business, our challenges are how do we make the experience of wherever clients touch that portfolio business a similar experience, no matter where they are, whether it's in region in Asia or it's across the globe. So large professional services portfolio business that has many stakeholders, many interests across totally global markets.
Craig.
Thank you, Kayvon. Craig Ellis, I'm the Chief Executive for MSIG Singapore, which is a Japanese-owned corporation. I'm relatively new to the group, but long time in insurance. I joined the group in January this year and took over the role in April. I mean, similar to a lot of our colleagues, but we always wanting to differentiate ourselves, but very much the client perspective is key in driving very much our overarching strategy, but particularly our digital strategy. And primarily that's been focused initially more on the distribution aspect, but we're seeing a lot more innovation very much in the product space, particularly when we talk about pay-as-you-go or bite-sized insurance, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more on this panel later this morning. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys all for the background. And for the first question, it's for all of you, so we can go through all the panelists again. Fairly open-ended and just a nice entry-level question. I guess within the past 4 or 5 years, globally, we've seen Insurtech, whether it's independent digital insurance companies like Lemonade, Those are the bigger names, but even recently, 3 years, we had 3 unicorns recently minted in the United States. Next Insurance, which has SME insurance, Root Insurance, which does auto and telematics, and the last one would be Hippo, which we shouldn't have forgotten the name. We invested in them. They do primarily home insurance. So big players in the insurance space, at least in the US, and it is trickling down into Asia as well. That being said, what do you feel like are the biggest opportunities within the incumbent space to digitalize and innovate within your own businesses? You can maybe point to some of the projects you've done already within your own businesses as well to highlight those. What do you think the biggest opportunities are, at least within ASEAN and Asia, and Singapore as a domestic market?
Maybe I'll share what we do instead of sharing what should be done. So I think for income, we have looked at this really from just 2 broad areas for incumbent insurance company. Really, one is really how do you revamp your existing businesses and business models. And by revamping, obviously, we look at the whole suite of the current consumer journey. How do you digitize and how do you augment the frontliners, the service staff, to bring more convenience and speed to the consumers of today. But more importantly, as what Kayvon has shared, with all these Insurtech disruptors coming into this part of the world, I think what is more important really is how do you actually reinvent yourself. And by that, I actually meant how do you actually launch a first-to-market product, and how do you even invent a business model that works today as well as for tomorrow, right? So the danger of this disruption becomes real, and I think what the incumbent should really look at this is, could you serve out a business model that could be plugged into a new ecosystem that has been created, rather than thinking in the old traditional insurance model.
I'm happy to go.
Sure.
The aspects of linking up with partnerships, traditionally pretty much in a lot of industries and also in the insurance spaces, there was always a very much a drive towards exclusivity, and that's getting much more challenging these days as things move much more quickly. So to the extent of being able to, and as part of this whole conference here, is being able to identify the key partners and right partners to be able to take your business forward, to be able to address your client needs and also address your, obviously, other stakeholders in that journey.
So maybe because I got to say something.
Maybe you can
right?
even touch on maybe you can even touch on the commercial side of the thing. We've talked about all personal lines, SME as well, but maybe on the commercial
Sure.
side, what you're saying.
And probably I'll look at more some macro trends and give a lot of hopes to the people here in the room, because we're in Asia first and foremost, right? So 2 facts that seem to be at odds to start with. Protection gap. So as you know, at Swiss Re, our mission is to make the world more resilient. So we're really looking at this protection gap, which is the difference between the full economic losses and those losses that are insured. 80 to 90% is the protection gap. So that means every time you have $1 of loss, only 10 cents to 20 cents is actually insured. So it's not a lot. Mobile internet penetration. How many of you have been traveling across Southeast Asia, not only Singapore, obviously, where everybody has 2 or 3 mobile phones? Go to Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and one thing that you will realize that everybody has a mobile phone. Everybody has internet. So I would say the penetration rate over there is about 60 to 70%. So the key for me to unlock the potential in Asia is really through partnership. How could we, as insurers who manage to only scratch the surface really with this 90% protection gap, could tap into that population that had 60% of mobile internet access. And then you start thinking about digital ecosystems and you start thinking about data. How could we harvest that data, turn it into risk insights, and how could we get better together? So to me, the key in Asia is partnership, and the prospect is one that is very interesting. The next 1 billion of the middle-income population is going to come from here. So the opportunity is very large for us here.
Yeah. I guess just to summarize, what the other panelists have said, product and partnership has been the theme of all 3. I guess as brokers, we sit right in the middle of that. So somebody has to embellish that client experience. Somebody has to bring those propositions together in a meaningful way that have meaning for the client ultimately. And somebody brings them together in a very complex system where everyone communicates slightly differently, has different internal platforms from which to do that. So our challenge is how do you bring all of those feeds and make that sensible to the client? I guess just one other thing that didn't come up is that this industry is spending a huge amount of time on its internal processes. There is no common language across this industry. It's very hard. There's lots of inefficient handoffs across this industry. We still haven't cracked that. So as much as we tend to spend time talking about the sexy innovation around the size of new products, new apps, new markets, there's nuts and bolts in this industry that probably many of us spend a great deal of our operating time trying to fix internally and then externally in our organization just to make sure there's adequate and efficient handoffs. So as much as there's a blue sky innovation out there, there's how do we more enable our own organizations to be sustainable for the future. And that's significant. That's not a small issue.
Of course, and I think somewhat reading my mind, because that kind of perfectly transitions into my exact next question, is that we're talking about partnerships here, digital penetration, blue sky opportunities, but I mean, there's a couple of factors that make it difficult. One is, I guess, from the IT and legacy infrastructure that a lot of insurance companies have. How are you guys navigating those internal challenges of integrating, whether it's large tech companies like Grab or startups that we have here in the room today, on the IT side, and also on the culture and business side? A lot of businesses, most of the people here in this room are from the innovation side, digital side. They've been exposed to these kind of ideas, but how do you create a culture of experimentation, somewhat of a willingness to fail on certain ideas? So maybe on the technical as well as the human HR/business side of things, how do you try to promote partnerships and the things we just mentioned on the previous question?
It's an excellent question. Particularly you mentioned culture. I draw the analogy in, particularly when there's been emergence of, say, control functions like compliance or risk. When you have a separate department, most people in the organization think it's their responsibility, when we know that they're more the enabler, and to ensure that it's embedded in every employee in the organization, those skills and understandings, and similarly from an innovation aspect and digitalization. So it's not like all of us, we have our labs, our specialist digital areas, but it's part and parcel of our day-to-day work going currently and also into the future. So I'm sure, like most of the panelists here in their organizations, we spend a lot of effort and time in learning development. We've basically put all our employees through some sort of at least digital awareness to the extent that we're making sure that, because insurance is a very traditional business, as you know, and very silo-based. So another focus is to be able to cut across those silos in a very much cross-functional basis, particularly in regard to product development. Often in the past, we developed products very much in isolation, very much by channel, be it agency or broker or whatever, depending on the traditional channels, where with disrupting and innovation, that's changed dramatically. And obviously, if we're listening to our customers, we've got to take a very different approach as we are.
Yeah, I think most of us are from large organizations up here, and innovation in large organizations is, I think many of us have been on a journey. So innovation in a large organization used to be maybe a department, right? So it was maybe a department at one point. Then it probably moved to this generic approach of send us your best ideas, which, didn't solve anything and was trying to solve everything. I think a very positive development with innovation in our organization is it's now very much a business as usual concept. So we are looking for innovation kind of within the envelope. We're looking for innovation where we can play fast failure within a 6-month timeline. Either we're successful, we see a return, or we abandon it and we start something else. So it's very much a small incremental change in an organization that people can, to your point, get their mind around. Culturally, it sits within the businesses that we're operating, and there's a tangible ROI, or not, at the end of it in a very, very short time frame. That doesn't mean to say that we've stopped innovating. I mean, we still do, at the highest levels of the organization, things like institutional venture partners, accelerators like yourself, we're partnered with, we're very active. A lot of our innovation comes from a very active M&A agenda that we have. So I think we recognize that innovation is multifaceted, but the innovation that we can do whilst running a business that's prime goal is serving clients and delivering profitability to shareholders is time-bound, incremental, and needs to be attached to the current business process with a very defined problem statement that isn't send us your best ideas, but how can we improve this small piece within the organization right now?
So I guess to the question as to who's responsible for innovation, for us is the 14,500 people who are employed by Swiss Re, so everybody really is. However, I have to say that the tone is set at the top. So our group CEO is actually chairing our tech transformation board, which is a very, very lean board made up of 5 people. But that board is in charge of really coordinating all of our activities internally and externally with the 6 tech clusters that we're partnering with all across the globe. Something that is quite interesting that we started to pilot recently are boot camps. So boot camps with the idea of moving use cases to POCs as quickly as possible and hopefully moving to implementation of concrete pilot. So the way we've done that is instead of starting with the technology, and I think that's one of the mistakes that we made in the past, saying, well, how could we use blockchain? How could we use IoT? Well, that does not mean a lot. The question is, what is the business issue? Actually, I would go one step further. The question is, what is the customer's issue and the customer's needs? So we start there, really starting from the business, looking at what is the issue, and then we put our internal groups of boot camps, if you will, in relation with our tech hubs. And we do those boot camps around 4 or 5 days, very small groups, very targeted, and the whole idea is to come to a pilot at the end. Another thing where I would say we are improving as an industry and as a business collective is a culture of not being perfect, the culture of failing. I have to be very mindful here. I've got my comms team in the audience, but you would have heard of the fuck-up nights. Yeah. Anyone?
Yeah.
You heard about that. It's a global sort of community movement, if you will, where businesses are just encouraged to share more about, the failures that they've gone through. Being Swiss Re, we couldn't call it as such. But the principle remains pretty much the same. We call it experience nights. So we get our colleagues to share failures and businesses that they have gone through as a team. And most importantly, we're trying to draw lessons out of it. And what we're trying to encourage out of that is transparency, but also trying to fail fast and move quickly.
Thanks, Peter.
So I think we all agree this is a difficult journey to get even started, right? So when we first started in NTUC Income, I think the thing we do is basically we form a dedicated team, just this small team of people responsible for innovations, and that seems to be the easiest way to get started, right? But of course, as you start doing and as more and more projects get going, the people around you start to see the potentials and possibilities, and I think that is the sweetest moment where you start to introduce a common language, a more structured methodologies, you start to run trainings and events, and this is how you start to pull people together. But one of the biggest, I think, innovations in an organization, especially an incumbent insurance company, is that we like to do big projects for whatever reason, right? We have project scope that run years, and as you start, the thing creep even further, right? So we can have a 3-year project plan, and it takes 5 years to complete. So this was, okay, I'm not sure where you guys work, but it happens in my company before. So I think this is one of the biggest things we want to tackle. Right? How do we start to hold projects such that you really go from an idea and you have a certain target, certain metrics, and like what Scott has shared and the rest of the panelists, you don't have to be perfect, right? And you look for the possibilities of going to a point where you say, okay, let's prove the concept, right? And then when you agree, then you say, okay, if this is a product for early adopters, does the product need all the features, right? Do you need a 3-year plan to launch this product? So maybe not. Right, and this is how we hope to instill in the organization the concept of you not only fail fast, and you try to fail small. Of course, you try not to fail, but if you have to, then at least you fail fast and you fail small, and then you learn. Right, so this has been the journey we take on, and this is one of the biggest way of working we try to change, and we think this would be the one that is important to insurance companies.
All right, thank you guys for your thoughts, and I'm going to ask an individual question of all of you, and I think we'll stick with Peter for this one. On the note of failing fast and doing some of the projects. You guys have been very progressive in terms of the number of projects you're doing internally, the number of new products you're launching, the marketing behind them. So like most recently at Fintech Festival, if you guys saw the booth, they were promoting Snack, which is their new product. We've done Droplet before and a variety of others. I guess to give us a bit of an insight as much as you can share, what is the process that goes in behind your team, like how you decide these ideas, and then also how do you balance between launching newer, perhaps smaller products to learn things and making a bottom line impact in the pressure you might have to actually work with the existing products you might have as well to make a significant change within the organization. So smaller projects to learn from as well as larger impact projects as well.
Sure. So we put customers at the center, and we look at the lifestyle of this customer in an ecosystem, in a new ecosystem which we are looking at. And then we start to ask ourselves, where are the opportunities? And can insurance solution be improved for this customer in these new ecosystems? These are the questions we ask ourselves before we even take on a project. And all the products that Kayvon has mentioned went through the same process. And we begin to do a lot of ethnography research. We do a lot of ideation workshops. The purpose of this is all to push the traditional boundaries of insurance, the way we look at things. But more importantly is that we believe in partnership, right? All the products we've done, going to the market quickly, is all a partnership product. Right, and we recognize that in the new economy, especially we talk about ecosystem players, they know the customers better than the insurers actually, right? And when we co-create this product with them, it actually fits the customer much better. And for the insurer, actually, is that we get the feedback much faster, right? And so case in point, for example, when we launch a Droplet, Droplet basically covers the rain, right? So when you buy Droplet, basically you take a ride-hailing, it covers the surge pricing. And this is a perfect example about the industry was disrupted, right? Because the transportation industry in Singapore was disrupted. The consumer behavior has changed, right? But it's precisely because of the changed behavior that is a new risk, right? And so to me, this is extremely exciting because as insurer, we are in the business of risk. As long as there's a new behavior, there's a new risk, and that is a new opportunity, all right? Hence, we developed this product to cover the surge pricing, right? And if you ask yourself, would you buy this product? Again, this is a question of, are you the early adopters, or is this too new to the market, or maybe it might not even work, right? But for us, if you go along this line of analysis, you will never launch this product, right? Because you don't have a data point, right? So our point is, how do we do a quick product out? So when we first launched a product, it only covers Grab, I think, all right? And subsequently now it covers all the ride-hailing in Singapore. When we launch a product, it's a one-day-per-trip product. Today, you can buy a month, right? So over the period of 9 months, we evolved the product. And we continue to take the feedback from the customers, and we continue to change. So I think this is an example of how we go out with an MVP, and we continue to mature the product over time.
Thanks. Craig, I want to hop over to you. In your former life as a CFO and currently in your fiscal responsibility as the CEO for MSIG in Singapore, obviously there's a certain financial pressure and board pressure to deliver on today's business objectives, today's KPIs. From a financial perspective, in terms of budget or even resource allocation, how do you balance between delivering today but also investing in the future to make sure MSIG is looking forward and growing and can continue to adapt as the market adapts as well?
As with any industry and any organization, obviously, yeah, we always need to ensure that our BAU continues, and that is then the source, particularly of future investment funds and so forth that you can apply. So the focus is very much on ensuring that the business and the core business continues to run well. And we would always, in our budgeting process, carve out quite a budget for our R&D and innovation aspects. So I think that would be typical of most organizations, and similarly along the lines of ensuring that there's quite scrutiny and rigor around that, so business cases would need to be developed and so forth to ensure then we have the way forward in regard to assessing those projects and determining return on investment. Now we know in some of this space, particularly where it is very disruptive, is that there's not a lot of precedent or history, so in that situation, you obviously really have to be a bit more imaginative in the way you go about assessing some of these projects and not necessarily a straight line return on investment. But just to digress slightly, if I could, I think the other aspect just worth mentioning, particularly this is insurance, but the discussions so far have been very focused, and understandably so, on personal lines and very much personal insurance. But a massive part of our industry, and we've got reinsurers and brokers here as well, is very much on the commercial insurance side, which is obviously certainly much more challenging when you think of buying some insurance or PA channel as insurance as against insuring a petrochemical plant or some major engineering such as Terminal 5 at Changi Airport. So those aspects, I think there's still a lot of unknowns in that area, and I certainly don't profess to have all the answers, but there's no doubt with certainly better data analytics and better data available to us, then the humans are the enablers of that to be able to come up with better decisions and better propositions for our clients in the commercial space as well.
All right, thanks. Wanted to hop over to you, Scott. So it's nice that we have a very diverse panel here, so we're seeing a lot of perspectives from different people in different parts of the insurance value chain. So specifically from the broker sector, earlier you mentioned being very client-facing. I guess what does that process look like in terms of diving in with your clients and then finding what their needs are and then balancing that with what you look for in certain technologies and how you integrate them within Willis Towers Watson's platforms and products?
Yeah, so for us, as these guys will know, a huge amount of our business is renewal business. We retain a lot of the same client base. So it's getting more sophisticated about that client base and understanding that there's different buying behaviors, there's different usage patterns, there's different products that they're looking for. So for us currently, it's really about segmentation. So it's looking at segmentation and recognizing that our different client needs vary. And you just spoke, Craig, about large commercial interests. Our large commercial interests are very interested in taking a lot of the decision-making in-house currently. They're trying to understand what used to be done by consultants and advisors. They want to see all of that data for themselves. They want to make a lot of those scenario planning before we even get there as an advisor to see if our scenario plans look like theirs. So you've got that end of the market, and then you've got the SME end of the market that are still very price conscious, price oriented, and want a transaction. So it's recognizing that there's a role for technology across that entire spectrum of segments. But fairly key is that technology augments. Okay, so that I know when we originally got into the whole idea of Insurtech, I think the industry felt very threatened. We've spent most of this panel talking about partnerships, ecosystems, complex as they are. Technology for us is just another aspect of how we can serve and how we can bring value and how we can differentiate. So for us, we'll take technology anywhere along that chain, any minute part or any large part. We're very agnostic. As Didier said, at the center of that is how's the client experience going to be enabled as a consequence of that. So client segmentation, then back from there.
And then last but not least, Didier, I think from our vantage point at Plug and Play and some of the investments we make and some of the startups we've worked with in Silicon Valley and other locations, most of the innovation in the commercial insurance side seems to be in terms of, data analytics, obviously within a reinsurance company is very pivotal, but then leveraging new data sources, whether it's a variety of IoT devices for a variety of use cases like marine cargo, for example, or home, property, maybe even in the cyberspace as well, which is something I think we're particularly interested in as a newer risk. But I guess how is Swiss Re currently leveraging new data sources? Are you guys, and how do you define and evaluate those data sources for yourselves or your clients as well?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a fair statement to say that most of the disruption in terms of, I guess, distribution model and partnerships did take place on the personal line space, and that is sort of intuitive. If you look at the standardization that can take place across and the leverage of the technology, right? If you bring the different parties together and you interconnect them. On the corporate space, we see a lot of innovation. Actually started from our clients and the exposure that they're facing. So you've been referring to cyber, for instance, but I would say more broadly speaking, what we've observed over the past few years is a shift in the risk landscape. So, over time, insurance has mainly been used to insure physical assets. Now, if you're looking at the S&P 500 and the top end of that ranking, you will see that most of the companies do not have an awful lot of physical assets. So think about Google, Amazon, Facebook. So if you do property insurance, you don't have much to insure. So for us and from our perspective and our clients' need, it's really shifting the cover from tangible risks to intangible risks. So that's really the number one, issue that we have and challenge that we're trying to tackle. The second one is on the corporate space. Again, I sometimes felt that a lot of the commercial insurance companies are still living in the Stone Age in terms of our cost structure. And I think similar to some of the panelists were saying, there's a lot of efforts right now taking place at Swiss Re to really improve the whole target operating model. And a lot of the innovation is being brought up to actually increase our efficiency, increase our speed to market, and making a better use of our resources. Last but not least, an interesting thing with the Swiss Re Group is, although we are responsible as corporate solutions for the commercial business, you would have seen that we have different business units. And one that I would like to mention here is what we call live capital. So, it initially started as an acquirer of closed life and health business. But if you look at what it's becoming now, it's really becoming a tech platform for B2B2C business. So you're really thinking about personal lines type for both life and non-life. And there again, I would just like to look back on the partnership topics, because for me, the biggest opportunity in the corporate world now when it comes to corporate insurance is not only about finding new solutions for new risks, but really partnering together. So thinking about all those large firms out there, our clients, our mutual clients, how could we create all together a digital ecosystem to access their end customers, to develop solutions that matter to their end customers that they could distribute as well?
Got it. So I want to have to conclude it, I want to have a really rapid fire round of, I guess, within your vantage points and where you guys sit within your respective companies. Very briefly for the people in the audience as well as some of the startups, I guess if you have one challenge or one problem you'd like to solve within your company, it's like a burning desire in like a minute or less, what would you describe that as, just to say what's on your mind right now in terms of current challenges? Any order is fine.
Yeah, I think the talent for this, I think the challenge for this industry is around the talent for this industry. So if you take the combination of all the answers that have been given, we've heard about increasing complexity, increasing partnerships, disintermediated workflows, increasingly global, increasingly siloed, you name it. People who have the skills to navigate that environment, high tolerance for ambiguity, critical thinking, great communicators, great relationship managers, low ego. Where do these people exist in the industry? How are we building those people in the industry who have not only the technical knowledge of the insurance industry, but are digital natives and then able to navigate all the relationships across these very complex ecosystems that we've described? I think that's an incredibly exciting challenge, an incredibly exciting industry for us all to be part of.
Hiring and talent. All right. Anyone else?
Choosing the right partner.
Okay. How so? Briefly.
Obviously, organizations like yourself very much help facilitate that. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not like you can use traditional models in regard to a lot of that assessment. A lot of it is obviously your own internal R&D and in some aspects, the judgment in regard to ensuring that you have common goals and common interest in regard to what you want to achieve.
We had a circle of CEO sessions with our startups, and finding those win-wins between what the startup's looking for and what the corporate's looking for in terms of that partnership is paramount. And for they know that process much better than we do on stage. But yeah, that's a very good point. Peter, Didier, would you like to share something?
So I think the key challenges for us is still about how do you bring the entire organization along in this journey. And what's still important is that how do you become a tech-enabled organization? While we recognize as an insurance company, you're not a tech company, right? But however, having said that, your partners are all tech companies, right? So you do have to level that gap before, if not the partnership is not going to work either, right? So this is the immediate gap, I would say, that an insurance company will have to bridge, close. And how do you bring the whole organization with you? I think that's the key challenge.
So technical expertise in evaluating technical talent, okay, and vendors for that matter. Didier, would you point to any specific challenge that you're currently facing? Or problem
I'm
you're looking
trying to
solve?
summarize it in one word:
Perfect.
mindset.
Okay, I'll leave that open to interpretation for the audience, but we're out of time for this panel, unfortunately, but thank you guys so much for your time and spending it with us here. And big round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you.